Intro to Writ, First Things and What to Expect. Hello, welcome to Writ. I'm Rob Kennedy. I'm a PhD in Religion and Postmodern Philosophy, and I've been teaching at Fanshawe for over 5 years. I'll be your instructor for Writ this term. If you want to reach me, the best way to do that, particularly in current circumstances, is through email at rkennedy@fanshawec.ca. And if you want to speak more, I guess we could say, in a richer medium, we can do so via arranging virtual office hours through the email if you like. So the most important thing on everyone's mind is the grade breakdown, so how you're going to be graded for the term. So more or less 15% will be on the Workly Week sheet or quiz that is given each week to help you understand the concepts that we'll be going over. 50%, so the largest portion of the grade, is in the weekly prompts. Now we're going to write a total of 6, and the best 4 of 6 grades will be taken. So that means even if you miss one due to illness, or you've written 4 and you're content with your grades, then the only grades that matter are the top 4. Now 10% are going to various types of audio presentations, online group work. This will be, first one is the group argument short project worth 5%. Basically in this, your group's going to put together an argument and defend against the rest of the class various types of responses and counter arguments. The second one is at the end of the term, I'm going to have the same groups put together a short review slideshow on one of the particular topics, just to have a review done through your peers, which may offer new insights that weren't apparent when I spoke about it originally, and to give you guys the understanding that when you teach something, you're far more likely to learn it than when you're just simply passively listening. Final aspect is the final prompt, which will be written the final week of class, and that is worth 25%. So that is really the 7th prompt, but it is set apart because it's the equivalent of a final exam for us. So the goal of the class is basically you want to commit yourself to the work each week to guarantee that you're going to become a better writer and reader at the end of the term. Because ultimately what you're going to see is that the aspects of the grammar and the elements of paragraph formation and being able to put together a persuasive argument are not only going to keep you out of embarrassing yourself when you're a professional, because the sad reality is that even though you can have the most brilliant ideas, if you get into the workforce and you're putting together like grammatical monstrosities, people are going to question your education and your intelligence. So a lot of people go into Writ and they're not too thrilled because it's not really a class that's associated with their program. But what you have to remember is you're going to be a college graduate at the end of your program. And with that, it means you're operating on a higher level than someone with a high school education. So you have to be able to do the basics really well as well. So this is going to give you that ability. So if you want to progress in your career and be a professional, you're interacting with customers, you seem like a knowledgeable person, and you're going to be more persuasive. So built into the aspects of understanding arguments as well is the ability to be able to persuade people. So in that sense, you're going to be more persuasive and you're going to come across as more polished. So the format of the class, the good news is I keep the lecture short because ultimately where you're going to do the majority of your learning is in the actual exercises. Okay, so I've structured the curriculum this term in really accumulative baby steps. All right, so I'm really starting you off at the most basic elements of a sentence starting this week when we look at nouns and pronouns, and we build up from there so you know what the exact micro pieces are. Even though this week is going to seem super easy, it's all going to add up, and it's going to hopefully go in a gradual enough way that you will be writing the main types of sentences and putting the pieces of the paragraphs in such an effective way that everyone can get an A. Okay, because it is very easy to get an A in this course and it's very easy to fail. So it depends upon, do you do the work? Do you give it the honest time to actually work through the process? It's not going to be a demanding class, but at the same time, it's one that requires enough attention that you get the basics down, okay? And it's very easy to do that if you put in, a decent effort. So basically, we're working predominantly less on lectures, more on writing, a little bit of working with others to solidify our knowledge, because sometimes you can hear me discuss it and it won't sink in, but if you're communicating with your group, it does. Okay? It'd be better if we were doing this in person, but ultimately online through Zoom, this can work just as effectively. Okay? And the other source of really where you're going to be learning a lot is in the feedback you receive on the prompts from me, as well as I'm going to basically do parts of the prompts myself when I have you guys write one. I will demonstrate the various components I'm looking for through an example. Not because I'm an amazing writer myself. Obviously, I'm really in philosophy and the study of religion, as I said. But at the same time, I can show you what the professors, Writ professors, are looking for on the final exam by modeling it. Okay, to the best of obviously my imperfect abilities. But seeing what I can put out, well, obviously it seems to be a big help for people to understand exactly what paragraphs and the elements should look like. So that all those elements combined, it should be effective for you to become an amazing writer by the end of the. So the key element of the class is the prompts, and what we mean by a prompt is just simply a short piece of writing that is basically presenting you with an argument, okay, and it's prompting you to respond, right? So basically, in your work, what you need to do, you have 50 minutes to read the prompt and write a 5-paragraph persuasive response essay in the periods where we're actually writing the 6 main prompts and the final prompt, right? So basically, the 2 key elements of developing your short argument that we'll talk about more in the upcoming weeks is you need to develop a stance. And a stance has 2 elements. So one is the topic, and then the second aspect is you're also not only responding to what is in the topic, but you're also responding to what the prompt author has said of the topic. So the prompt author's argument, okay? So when you respond critically to both those aspects, that is when you have done an effective and critical job. So critical thinking, you're applying critical thinking, right? If you just simply talk about the topic and you completely forget about the prompt author, you haven't engaged the argument, which is the most critical aspect of becoming an effective writer and writing an effective prompt response essay. Okay. So main thing on most people's minds is how the prompt's graded. Well, it really comes down to basically the rubric, okay, and how you put together the 4 categories based upon how your persuasive essay is organized, what content you've come up with, and the quality of the content, the style you do it. So style is basically the variety of different sentence structures and their effectiveness in presenting the information. And then the mechanics is basically the grammar, okay? So you see here, each of these are graded out of 6, so of a total of 24 marks for each of the 6 individual prompts and the final prompt, okay? Final prompt is actually just graded out of 6. And it will be graded by, typically it's graded by two different professors than myself. So if I've been grading you a little high, they will probably bring it down, or vice versa. If I've been grading it a little low, then they will bring your grade up, okay? But hopefully what you're going to see through the term is that you get better at writing the prompts and you apply the little bits of information I give you each time back, that your grades are going to gradually increase, okay? So by the time you're writing prompt 5 and 6, you should be hitting full stride, and ultimately your best prompt anyway should be the final prompt, which is good. So here is the actual portion of the actual rubric itself. So you can see here, based upon the various categories, there are certain criteria that I'm looking for in order for you to score a specific score in either of the 4. So in content, organization, style, and mechanics, right? So typical starting point is somewhere between 3.5 and 4, and then usually by end of term, people are usually up to 5.5. Okay, so you can kind of have a look at the various components. I'll post the PDF of the rubric itself, and you'll also receive, I'll give you the score back with each prompt, so you'll have an idea based upon the bullets under that category what you have demonstrated. Okay, so in that way you'll know what you need to work on and what you're doing well week to week. So the focus of Writ is predominantly you're learning to read and write persuasive arguments. And in that, basically the prompts that we read, typically they're not written well. So if you're looking of how a prompt should be written, or you're looking for the elements that we'll be discussing when I tell you how to write, these aren't set up that way because it allows you to criticize the prompt author or critique their argument based upon how they've organized their argument and what evidence they provide in the content in order to structure an effective persuasive argument. So if they haven't done that, then that's an opportunity, because now you will know what it looks like, so you'll be able to critique and judge how others fall short of the mark. Okay, so just because the prompts are bad, that doesn't mean that we can write badly. So in other words, more or less, we are going to be utilizing a 5-paragraph persuasive essay format, and this is going to teach us really the key ingredients of writing well and writing persuasively. Okay, because ultimately as a professional writer, you're going to find that a lot of the same skills are applicable or carry over, right? Because even when you're speaking in everyday language, you're going to learn how to speak persuasively based upon the elements that you've picked up in class. Because persuasive writing is the same thing as persuasive speaking, okay? So when you understand what an argument is and what the elements are dependent upon, you'll be able to access those mentally even when you're in common conversation. So this could be professionally or it could be interpersonally. Okay, just simply what this is, and particularly with the time frame you have in the 50 minutes in class, you have to be able to develop and organize that persuasive argument quickly. The 5-paragraph persuasive essay is built upon the 5 different paragraphs that can be broken down into the elements of an introduction, your first body paragraph, second and third body paragraphs, and then a conclusion. Okay, so we'll talk now just as a brief introduction to the parts, but we'll go in more in detail in the upcoming weeks, specifically what we're looking for. Through high school, most of you probably have some vague sense of what a thesis statement is and what's expected in an intro paragraph. Okay, but more or less the thesis statement is your main stance, or it's your main claim or a main opinion statement, right? So it's basically what you're going to be arguing in favor of for the rest of the paper. So it's important because it acts as an umbrella to everything that's underneath. So everything else that follows in the body paragraphs and in the conclusion needs to be working towards proving your thesis, okay? So you can think of the thesis as really your skeletal structure of the paper. So introductory paragraph, in distinction from the thesis is in the introductory paragraph, but also too an introductory paragraph, generally speaking, is operating to introduce the conversation between you, the prompt author, and even beyond that, even to other voices that the prompt author is engaged in conversation. The body paragraphs build off of the thesis statement. So each of the 3 body paragraphs, each one individually is working to argue a unique supporting claim or a supporting opinion statement about a subtopic about the thesis itself. Okay, this will become more apparent when we work on body paragraphs, exactly what we mean. But ultimately, okay, what you want to know is each of these body paragraphs are going to talk about one different or distinct aspect of the larger topic. Okay, so we're seeing the topic through the lens of 3 different subtopics. So this way you're able to prove the thesis through looking at the bigger topic or the general topic from 3 different perspectives. Okay. Lastly, the concluding paragraph is really where you're going to summarize and wrap up your final or full argument with the hindsight of what has been completed or discussed in the body paragraph specifically. Okay, this is kind of where you draw your final assessment or conclusions in kind of a way that brings everything together nice and neat for your reader. So at the end of the paper, there is some sense of finality and that there is a takeaway in terms of what they have learned through reading your paper. Part 2, the work of today. So we'll be looking at some elements of building persuasive argument. So one major thing that we want to avoid using are logical fallacies, which basically a fallacy or specifically a logical fallacy is a type of false assumption that the formal rules of logic or argument would deem invalid. So if you commit a logical fallacy and someone is aware of a logical fallacy being present in your argument, basically everything else you say in the paper has just been invalidated. Okay? So what's bad about this is if you don't recognize them in your own writing, you can basically be instantly discredited by other people and you've just wasted your entire time. Whereas if you recognize them in the work of other people, particularly the prompt authors, then you can speak intelligently to explain why their argument is invalid. Okay? This is a very, what we might say, strong way to prove your point by discrediting people with the logical certitude of having the rules of logic and fallacies behind you, right? So in this sense, knowing what they are and how to avoid them, you're going to construct more tightly defined arguments. And then also too, what we're going to do is this week we're just going to look at the 4 most common types so we can avoid them and then also to potentially identify them when we're working with the prompts. A hasty generalization is basically an error when someone makes too broad of a generalization or a generalized statement. So typically this is based upon 2 different errors. Okay, one is they've taken too little of a sample size in making a generalization, or the second error is they've taken a sample that isn't representative of the larger generalization. Okay, so an example of this would be if my brother likes to eat a lot of pizzas and french fries and he is ripped, so physically like very in shape, I can say that pizza and fries are healthy and don't really make a person overweight if eaten in excess. Okay, so in this we see the fallacy built in of the hasty generalizations, because some people just have freak genetics, or their brother is younger and still has a high metabolism, which come when they reach their 30s was going to gradually slow down, and then he gets the Molson belly or the beer belly. Okay, so another one of these would be the most common logical fallacy is the hasty generalization. Okay, so this in itself is potentially another generalization. So anytime you're generalizing or saying things that you're speaking too broadly, you want to try and speak more in specifics. Okay, because that will keep you, or if you're aware that this often happens or this may be the case, like your language isn't strong, black and white, it's more qualified, it's more limited. This avoids hasty generalizations. Second type of fallacy is the bandwagon fallacy. So basically people commit this when they appeal to something that everyone else is doing. Okay, or it's an appeal to popularity or the fact that many people do something as an attempted form of validation. So the error here is basically just because everyone's doing it doesn't make it right. Okay, so for example, if they did, then the earth would have made itself flat for most of history to accommodate the popular belief. So just because everyone in the medieval world thought the earth was flat did not necessarily mean that that was a valid argument. Okay, we have these that we're not even aware of, but hopefully the future will be better educated or more have a deeper understanding of how the world works than we do. Okay, so these exist, and we may see some of these that people take for granted in common, but we may point these out to other people, and just because they are arguing against us via the bandwagon appeal, so everyone thinks this, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are right, okay? Just because everyone thinks it doesn't legitimate it. So another example, Seamus pointed a drunken finger at Sean and asked him to explain how so many people could believe in leprechauns if they're only a silly old superstition. Sean, however, had a few too many Guinness himself and fell off his chair. Okay, so in this sense, if so many people believe in leprechauns, they must be true. Okay, is that not a bandwagon fallacy? So third type of fallacy we're going to look at is the either-or fallacy, also called the black or white fallacy or the false dichotomy fallacy. So what happens with this one? You presented two alternative states as the only possibilities, when in fact there's more possibilities that exist. Okay? So in this sense, it's very misleading towards your audience because you're basically only presenting two alternatives when there could be more. So example of this, when you have basically politicians, for example, who say you're either with us or you're against us, which was a famous one that George W. Bush said after the fallout of 9/11. Most of you guys will not be old enough to remember, but he basically came out and said you're either with us or you're on the side of the terrorists. Okay, he was appealing or committing a fallacy, in specific, the black or white, false dichotomy, or either or fallacy. Fourth type of fallacy we're going to look at is the red herring fallacy. And basically, a red herring gets its name from the, I guess we would say, metaphoric of the idea that there is someone who is interfering with the hunt. So back in aristocratic England, it may still happen to a certain degree, but it's probably been banned or isn't practiced very commonly due to cruelty of animals towards the fox. But basically the fox hunt, the Englishmen are on their horses. They have all the various hunting hounds, and the hounds chase down the fox. The hunters are on horseback, and I guess they kind of just accompany as the hounds chase down the hawks and tear it to pieces. I'm not really too sure. But the idea of the red herring fallacy is you get this notion that someone is on the trail of the fox, or the fox being the person who's creating the fallacy, so to speak. And by wiping, a herring is basically a really stinky fish. So by wiping the fish across the path of where the hounds are following the fox, then they would be diverted by their sense of smell and lose the original scent. So in this sense, when we talk about the argument, a red herring fallacy operates as a type of smokescreen, okay, because it distracts people from the original topic that was being discussed. So a lot of politicians typically use this all the time. So they're asked by an interviewer to explain how they feel about a certain policy or what their response is to that policy, and then the politician follows up by explaining another topic that may be slightly related or is completely unrelated, going into a long explanation without ever having answered the original question, but most people aren't even aware that they've done so. So this week's grammar, we're going to be looking at nouns and pronouns. So this week, we're looking at one of the key components of a simple sentence. So before we discuss simple sentences and work with them, I want you to be rock solid in your understanding of the two components. For some people, some of this is going to be evident, but enjoy the easiness for this week. A lot of people know what a noun is. Most people don't know what a pronoun is, so we'll clear that up. The second part of the simple sentence is the verb predicate. We'll look at that in upcoming weeks. Today we'll talk about the noun pronoun. So simplest terms, a noun is any person, place, or thing. So examples, particularly, most of us know what a person, a place is, and what an animal is. So, but a thing, I guess, well, this person in particular made this image is distinguishing animals. We might say animals are kind of a hybrid between a person and a thing. Really, a human being is also a kind of has shares in thingness, but nonetheless, a thing in this case can be something solid like a book or a pencil or an apple, or it can be something more abstract like an idea or a disease. Okay, so lots of things, but typically we want to be able to recognize when we're dealing with a thing. So whether that's a person thing, a place thing, an animal thing, or an abstract thing, or some kind of solid entity. Okay, so recognizing those is what we'll be looking at this week. So noun, most people know. Pronoun gets a little wishy-washier. Basically, a pronoun, you see the word noun in pronoun, okay? It's basically because it's a word that's used in place of a noun. So in this sense, we typically use pronouns to avoid repetition. And this makes sentences easier to read and understand. So most common types of pronouns that you can remember, he, she, it, they, this. So if I say about Tony that he borrowed my pen, when I said he borrowed my pen, okay, I'm obviously referring to the noun Tony, which in this case has been replaced by the pronoun. So that's what pronouns do, and you can see how they interrelate in a sentence with nouns, because they are the things that are used in place of nouns, but it's a referent, okay? So in that part, we're going to find them in key elements of the sentence, which we need to understand in order to understand the grammar behind how to construct grammatically beautiful sentences. So overall, there's 7 different kinds of pronouns. We won't go that in detail because we want to keep things simplified so we get the most bang for our buck. Okay, the first type of pronoun is personal pronouns, right? So it could be he, she, they, him, them, her, for example. A second kind of pronoun are indefinite pronouns. So you can see here, these are more abstract or indefinite, right? So instead of specific group, could be anybody or everyone, okay? Instead of him or her, could be someone or somebody, right? Instead of me, it could be one, okay, or nobody. So in this sense, the word that replaces the noun is indefinite. So the work for this week, basically what we're going to do, the main work is going to be, I want you to read the prompt that it provided, and in a 1-paragraph response, I want you to tell me basically what you think the author's position of the prompt is and what you think of it. How are they right? How are they wrong? Okay. Second part, going to be looking at nouns and pronouns. So just being able to identify when you see them in a sentence. Okay. Third part will be basically identifying the types of logical fallacies in actual examples. Okay. So these will be the ones that we've looked at. All right. So with that, you'll basically have a week's time to get that work done, and then we will be on to the new materials, really hitting stride for next week. So have a good week. If you have any issues, send me an email. Bye for now.